Galimera. Good morning. Sorry for the late broadcast today, but we had administration duties to do in town with the accountant and KEP, etc. All within keeping for things that you have to do when you live here in the winter in Greece. So we've been out this morning, up bright and breezy. The weather actually is on the turn, this morning. It was grim. I've got to be honest, it was grim. And Amanda, who sent her lovely concise weather forecast, she said Monday's weather, she said, Ginge, showers with some thunderstorms in places, temperatures 20, but it's going to feel like 19. Have a great day. Well, to be honest, the weather seems to be on the turn, actually. It's looking just a little bit more pleasant at the moment. Big shout out to Rachel Harrison, who's tuning in. Also, Ronia Pete Dillon is also tuning in as well. Nice to have you guys looking in. Can I just say this weekend, what a very interesting weekend. Also rather emotional as well with Remembrance Day. Jane and I were out feeding yesterday afternoon. Can I just say thank you for all the kind regards that you sent, reference our feeding duties. Just to remind you, we're just one of a group, all right? There's lots of other individuals who's doing far more than what we're doing in looking after the animals here, the strays, etc. But we do what we can. And thank you again to Dan Norman down there in Kalamaki for your little message as well about stray dogs. Thank you for that. Yeah, there seems to be a lot less about in Kalamaki and that, although there are still dogs being dumped in other locations around the island. And my hat's off to all those people that are taking in strays and doing what they can, either to rehome them, rehouse them, or even just taking them on as pets as well. But once again, big shout out to the animal welfare people here on the island that do absolute loads here. Can I just say also a big hello to Ian T as well. Nice to have you tuning in. I'm glad you're back at home now. Looks like you've been released from Heartlands Hospital in Birmingham. So hopefully we'll catch up at some point. Right, let's get down to what's been going on here within the last 24 hours. I'm just going to quickly switch my screen round so you can see my dulcet face. There you go. So COVID in the last 24 hours. COVID infections have actually dropped, remember yesterday, I didn't have the number for yesterday, but yesterday we had 6,154 new infections. And today I could report that the new infections across the country has dropped quite significantly, but this is a Monday and sometimes they don't do as much testing over the weekend as what you would think. But anyway, the latest figures in from yesterday are 3,869 new infections across Greece. That brings the toll at the moment up to 831,874, 50% of which are male who have been affected. Now, regards identified cases into the country, 12 new cases were detected. That was up on the day before, where 10 new cases were detected. And according to the national stats, what I've done is this. I've collated all of last week's statistics for the different islands for their weekly infection rate that they had at the end of last week. All right, so cases in Macardo today, 14 new cases have been reported. They had 88 cases during that previous 7 days, and that island is in the green. Now, when it comes to Corfu, they've had 12 new infections recorded in the last 24 hours. Their total infection rate across the past week was 567, and they are in the red. As for Kefalonia, they had 2 new cases of infection reported within the last 24 hours. But last week, they had 71 cases during that week, and they are in amber. Now, as for Zakynthos, we had 18 new infections reported yesterday. We've had 114 infections in the past 7 days, and that's the reason why Zakynthos is in the red. Now, when I say in the red, just to remind people, that is in the red as regards Greece's system of traffic lighting. In regards to Europe, Greece, believe it or not, is still in the green at the moment. When it comes to deaths at the moment, yesterday saw the highest death rate since May the 6th. We had 80 new deaths across the country. That was up on 70 on the previous report. 16,766 people have passed away since the beginning of the pandemic. 95.3% of those had underlying diseases or were over the age of 70. And again, our condolences to those families that are affected by their loss today. Anyway, when it comes to critical cases, they are again slowly creeping up. The other day I reported 530 cases. That has risen up to 536 within the last 24 hours. Critical cases in hospitals at the moment are 328 male, 210 female. The average age of those people is about 65 years of age. 83.2% have underlying health issues or are over the age of 70. Now, regarding critical cases, 446 of those people are either unvaccinated or had partial vaccination, i.e. they may have only had one dose, whereas 90 people in that group are fully vaccinated. So again, we'll keep an eye on that because the Greek government is saying that their health centres are under crisis at the moment. Now, as the Netherlands enters a partial lockdown over the weekend, with bars and cafes and restaurants can remain open, but during the hours of 6 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. This is in the Netherlands. However, you must have proof of vaccination and antibodies, and you even got to book seating for diners, as with the case with drinking venues. Sports events in Holland can only go ahead but without spectators. So this is Holland now looking at partial lockdown. Now, when you look at what's going on in Austria, and you might remember Jane and I were supposed to be going to Austria for the final concert for Opus, who were finishing after 40 years. We decided that it's not going to be possible for us to go with the draconian measures now that Austria are now implementing. Austria is taking draconian measures, and that's the way that they're being described in the Greek press here. That's not me saying that or trying to make it sound worse, but it's been deemed necessary to step the ordering of it's been necessary to deem the step of ordering unvaccinated citizens to enter lockdown from tomorrow. Those not vaccinated will only be allowed to leave their home for a limited number of reasons, such as for work or buying food. So basically, the Austrians really are locking down. Austria, like many European countries, is struggling with a record number of infections and severe pressure on their health services. Only 65% of Austrians are now fully vaccinated, meaning that the new restrictions will affect around about 2 million of their citizens. Now, interestingly, Greek experts now advising the government on coronavirus are likely to recommend more COVID tests for the unvaccinated. The Deputy Health Minister, Macardo, said today, as the country struggles to contain the fourth wave of the pandemic, the committee is expected to be meeting on Wednesday to discuss this situation. Now, under the current restrictions, people who do not have a vaccination of a valid recovery certificate, like myself, have to show a negative rapid or PCR test to gain admission to all retail outlets apart from food stores, as well as to hair salons, cafes, restaurants and other mixed venues. Now, despite a surge in the number of COVID patients on ventilators, the government has repeatedly ruled out imposing any more general restrictions on movement and has instead opted for the restrictions on their movements and habits of people who refuse to get the jab. So those people that are refusing to get the jab, obviously there's going to be more restrictions likely on the way. Whether it's going to go the same way as what they've said for Austria, we'll wait and see. But again, if these people are doing as they're told, and that is being checked, doing PCR tests, you know that they are safe. Once again, just because you're vaccinated and double jabbed doesn't necessarily mean that you are not still spreading and you're not taking the disease around. So again, I just really question this logic at the moment that all governments seem to be wanting vaccination. Anyway, it also said as well that the first cracks in the wall of the unvaccinated are becoming visible with a significant increase of the first dose vaccinations, while persistent high infection rates and hospitalizations are placing the national health system of Greece under suffocating pressure. The requisition of COVID beds from the private sector is only a matter of time. Anyway, meanwhile, scientists are calling for mass flu vaccinations, stressing that a possible twin attack by the virus may lead to a case of incurable diseases. So what they're saying, not only are they talking about having COVID vaccinations, but they're also talking about having flu inoculations as well, because they're talking about a twinned double attack from both sides of those particular viruses, which could actually create incurable diseases. What incurable diseases, I don't know. But again, this is the rhetoric that is now being pushed out by the media here in Greece. Amid this crisis, weakened by the high infection rates and increased COVID-related hospitalizations, the vaccinations situation has offered a relative respite, with the first dose inoculation rates rising significantly over the last 10 days. Now, on Friday alone, they exceeded 230,000. However, the attempt to create even bigger cracks in the wall of the unvaccinated may prove to be very difficult, as surveys commissioned by the Greek government are finding it extremely hard to establish what convinced those who initially refused or were reluctant to get the inoculation. In turn, this difficulty is hampering authorities' efforts to come up with an effective persuasion campaign. Well, mainly a lot of people are not getting vaccinated because, one, they don't want to be told they have to be vaccinated. They want the right of choice. And maybe because the way the vaccine was rushed through within 2 months instead of the normal 6 months that it takes for most vaccines and medicines to be analysed and assisted, people are just being cautious. And you know what? I don't blame them for being cautious, especially when they're saying now, like they did at the beginning, if you were vaccinated, you would be safe and you would be free. And then as time has gone on, it's now been discovered that these vaccines are not as effective as what they first thought to have been. The effects of the vaccines or the medicine of the vaccine starts to wear off. And then basically you then have to have a third jab to bolster it back up again. And there's also been reports that immune systems are seriously damaged as well by the vaccine when it comes to other diseases and other infections as well. So you lose something with one and you lose something with another. And that is one of the reasons why people are just being cautious. But like myself, I'm just being cautious. I don't truly trust the pharmacy companies. I'm waiting. At the moment, I'm happy that I caught COVID. I got over it. My body had the immunity to fight it. And I do understand that there are those people, those bodies cannot fight the infection. So let's get this clear. I'm not anti-vaccination. I am pro-choice, that you can decide yourself whether you have it. And all these people now who seem and sound so righteous that they've had the vaccine, well, good on you. We'll see what happens in maybe, say, 5 years' time, or maybe even sooner, or maybe within a few months when you are trying to get a booster shot and you're finding it difficult to get one of those. Let's look at Sweden. Good morning to Mary Hallberg. At the moment, Sweden took the right answer with herd immunity. That is what has fought infections and pandemics in the past, even the Black Death, the plague, etc. If it hadn't have been for immunity with those diseases, then obviously the whole of the populations of the world would have wiped out completely. So nature has its way of taking course, and because some of the vaccines came out so quickly, the virus had time to mutate and change because of the vaccines that were coming out and being put in place. So that could be another reason why people are erring on the side of caution at the moment who don't want to be vaccinated. Anyway, here endeth the lesson for that. At the moment, it seems that the police have been out and about across Greece at the moment, imposing the rules that were introduced last week in regards people's freedom of movement and going in and out of bars. And it seems a total of 74,697 inspections were carried out on Saturday by authorities across Greece, which recorded violations of epidemiology measures. Now, the National Transparency Authority announced that a total of 134,450 euros in fines were imposed, while 15 companies were forced to suspend their operations for 15 days. At the moment, there's been no figures being released how that has affected the Ionian, but as soon as I get any information on that, I will let you know. Anyway, the main infringements concerned the lack of use of masks indoors, social distancing, lack of documentation regarding the maximum number of customers allowed to be inside stores, and rules of operation, serving customers indoors in restaurants, cafes, bars and nightclubs without a vaccination of COVID-19 recovery certificate, and for incoming international travellers' failure to comply with the electronic passenger locator form. So people coming into the country basically not filling in a PLF. So again, they were obviously being picked up and fined on their entry. Again, no information on who was paying, shall we say, this 134,000 euros. But again, it's only a matter of time before that information will start to filter through. Interesting, a little bit of local news, nothing to do with COVID. It seems in a press press release issued by the mayor of Zakynthos, he characterised the intervention of the police during a meeting of the Municipal Council last week. You might remember we covered that story in one of my podcasts, who characteristically pointed out that it must be investigated and answered as to what was the real purpose of this operation. Now, it seems that in the course of commending the police on acting as they did, he did say in his press release that it was strange that it's never actually been said as to why the police arrived at that meeting, arrested a member of the public from there, and nothing has been heard from the police whatsoever about the reasons behind the arrest or who the person was that was arrested, and that strangely the police chief has gone very quiet on the issue. Anyway, this immediate interest to the police director, who he said has shown considerable diligence in policing the island, but it has also bothered him as to why there's been no response as to why the police turned up when they did, and for what reason they arrested this gentleman and took him away. He says, until then, he said, the voices of the disgrace, the type of protests against militantism and the insult of democracy are all at least excessive, he said, because a lot of people were crying about how dare the police come in and disrupt a meeting of the Municipal Council. However, he believes that we first ourselves must respect the institutional role of the Municipal Council in order to have the right to ask the respect of others. So basically what he said, he would feel that maybe the police should have said, why was this person arrested? Why was this person taken away? Some media outlets have actually reported that there might be discourse within the police themselves, and whoever this man was who was going to say something at this meeting, they didn't want him to be heard. Again, that's what's been written as conjecture in some of the local press here. Again, we'll keep an eye and ears open to see if we can get to the bottom of who this person was that was lifted, why he was lifted, and why the police made no reference at all in any press statement, press release or anything else that as to why this man was arrested and taken away before that meeting. Anyway, some other interesting news and some good news as well. Fraport, they're the people who are basically the owners of the local airport here and also 17 airports across the country as well. They've been starting to release data about the Ionian and about how the season has gone, about arrivals here on the islands. Now, at the moment, it seems Zakynthos is in second place against Corfu for the month of October in regarding arrivals. I'm going to quickly just give you the numbers. Corfu had in 2021 108,524 tourists pass through the airport, which was up on the year before where they'd had 52,541. That was an increase of about 106%. Now, as for Zakynthos, we had in 2021 28,703 tourists pass through the airport, whereas in 2020 we had 5,726 tourists, and that was an increase, believe it or not, of 401.3%. Now, Lefkada, little tiny island, I've got to be honest, they had 16,967 tourists arrive there. In 2020, they had 6,296 tourists, so they had an increase of 169%. And Kefalonia, our neighbours across the water, in 2021, they had 7,395 tourists arrive. And in 2020, they had 5,300 tourists arrive. And that was an increase of 39.5%. Remember, those were the figures just for October. Now, when you look at the tourism season from May to October, Corfu came out at number one. In 2021, they had a total of 902,056 tourists pass through their local airport, whereas in 2020, they had 404,144. So they saw an increase of 123% on their season for this year. Now, Zakynthos, in 2021, believe it or not, we had 471,866 tourists pass through the airport. And in 2020, we only had 196,697 tourists pass through the airport. So we, in effect, had an increase of 139% here for the season. Now, Lefkada, again, a much smaller island than ours. They had 174,108 tourists pass through their airport. And in 2020, they had 74,547 tourists. So they had an increase in their tourist season of around about 133.6%. Kefalonia, I was quite surprised at Kefalonia's increase. Kefalonia, if you remember, didn't have the same restrictions that we had here in Zakynthos, where we were put in the red and we had a limited amount of people. We had lockdowns going on, etc., etc. Kefalonia had no imposition on them placed at all last year. However, their total tourists that passed through their airport was 117,302. And this year, in 2020, for the whole of their season, they had 75,805 tourists. So they had an increase of 54.8%. So it's going to be interesting to see next year how the figures stack up for our season next year. And finally, as you might remember yesterday, I did say to you that the classic Athens Marathon took place on Sunday with 9,800 athletes from 83 countries running the 42,195 meters from Marathon to the Panathinaikos Stadium in central Athens. Among that 30,000 of other runners that came in, there was a guy by the name of Stelios Prasis. Now, this guy was aged 90 years of age. Now, he was able to finish the marathon yesterday. His grandchildren were waiting for him at almost every checkpoint around the course to keep him going, and they were allowed to join him on the last small section. And as they said in their words, it was the last steps of joy. Anyway, just remind you that the marathon returned after years of absence due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, and the new feature of the marathon this year, that it was staggered in 2 stages, with a first group that set off first, and I would think that would be the 83 countries of basically professional style athletes, serious runners, and then the next group, the fun runners, they all took off in a second thing. This was obviously to spread the amount of people about and to keep it in line with the protocols for the actual race. It's health protocols in place as well. So there you go. That's the news for today. Once again, I apologise for my late broadcast. Seems I've got a few more people in because it's a little bit later. Quick shout out to Linda and Gary over there in Essex. Nice for you to be tuning in today. Also as well, Eric Turrell over there in Israel. Nice to have you tuning in as well. Sandra Gibson also tuning in as well. Nice to see you. John Gall, RAF Reg buddy, tuning in. Aaron Vardy, another RAF Reg buddy. I know you've left me a comment, but I probably won't be able to see that comment just because of the way this tablet operates, all right? It's very frustrating and very annoying. Liz and Jane Baker says morning. Raina and Pete Dillon also are watching. I know Dave Foley, another RAF Reg buddy, is watching as well. Wendy Norcliffe is watching. Let's have a look. I know there's a message, and I think it's to do with yesterday's remembrance. A lot of RAF Reg were down there in London. I think there was 149 RAF Reg gunners, ex-RAF Reg gunners were marching in the march past. Unfortunately, the Queen wasn't able to attend because she's had some back injuries, and she was unable, after 22 years, she wasn't able to attend the cenotaph. I'm just praying that there's nothing else serious behind what's gone with her not appearing in public, and that she is well. But anyway, everybody that turned out had a fantastic day. A lot of people catching up. A few tipples of whiskey going down as well. I think the Union Jack Club was rocking. I know the Embankment was rocking. Normally the RAF Reg gunners all meet up on the Embankment and go on one of the little boats that's down there for a little bit of a party, catching up with old buddies. But as remembering those that have fallen, and those faces that were probably not present this year because during the previous year they had passed and gone. But anyway, one day I will get to the cenotaph. That was something I always wanted to do. I used to do remembrance with my dad in Minster, in the village where he lived, and that was always a great time. And I used to meet up with a few RAF Reg buddies in Minster near Margate and Ramsgate. Right, anyway, that's it from me for today. Thank you again for your support. Please, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you can like and subscribe the channel as well. I'm just trying to make that grow a little bit. But once again, I'll keep my ear to the ground. If I hear of anything, then I will let you know. And you have a fantastic day wherever you are in the world. Ta-ra.